plasma bolt missed Commander Jake Morrison's head by centimeters. He rolled behind a crystalline pillar as 3 more shots scorched the air where he had been standing moments before. This was supposed to be a diplomatic ceremony, not a firefight. 20 minutes earlier, he had stood before Queen Zara Khan of the Velthran Empire, speaking vows of unity between their species. The marriage was political, a bridge between humanity and the massive alien civilization that controlled half the galaxy. She was beautiful in an otherworldly way, with silver skin that seemed to shimmer and eyes like molten gold. Her people were elegant, refined, and had never lost a war in 3,000 years. Jake was a soldier first, a diplomat by necessity. Earth needed this alliance. The Krill Syndicate had been pushing into human space for months, and without the Velthran fleet, humanity faced extinction. So he said the words, wore the ceremonial armor, and became the first human to marry into Velthran royalty. The explosion that ripped through the Grand Hall came without warning. Krill shock troopers materialized from cloaked drop pods, their weapons already firing. They had one objective: kill the Queen and shatter the Alliance before it could begin. Jake's ceremonial armor was just for show, but the pistol hidden beneath it was very real. He drew it in one smooth motion, putting 2 rounds through the faceplate of the nearest Krill soldier. The alien dropped, purple blood pooling on the marble floor. Queen Zara Khan stood frozen, her royal guards scrambling to form a protective circle around her. They were trained for parades and formal escorts, not assassination attempts. Half of them died in the first 10 seconds. Jake moved. His body shifted into combat mode, muscle memory from 100 battlefields taking over. He grabbed a fallen guard's rifle, checked the charge, and opened fire. 3 Krill went down before they even realized where the shots were coming from. The Queen's golden eyes locked onto him. She had never seen a human fight before. Her people had assumed humans were soft, desperate, willing to marry for protection because they could not protect themselves. She was beginning to understand how wrong that assumption was. Jake vaulted over a ceremonial table, firing as he moved. A Krill blade skimmed his shoulder, drawing blood. He spun, drove his elbow into the alien's throat, and put a round through its skull at point-blank range.
No hesitation. No mercy.
More Krill poured into the hall. 15. 20. They kept coming, materializing from stealth fields like phantoms. Jake kept fighting. He moved like water, every action flowing into the next. Shoot. Move. Reload. Strike. Survive. A plasma grenade arced toward the Queen. Jake saw it, calculated the trajectory in a split second, and threw himself into its path. He caught it midair and hurled it back toward the Krill formation. The explosion consumed 4 of them instantly. The Queen watched her new husband dance through death itself, and for the first time in her long life she felt something close to awe. The battle raged on. Jake stood between the Queen and her enemies, a human wall of controlled violence. The Krill had made a mistake. They thought this was an easy target. They were learning otherwise. One of the Krill commanders barked orders in their clicking language. The remaining soldiers began to coordinate, forming a kill box around Jake's position. They had numbers. They had superior technology. They had every advantage except one. They were not fighting for something they loved. Jake was. He checked his remaining ammunition.
7 rounds. 23 hostiles.
The math was not in his favor, but math had never stopped him before. He looked back at Queen Zara Khan, gave her a slight nod, and prepared to show the galaxy exactly what humans were capable of when pushed to the edge. The Kryll advanced. Jake smiled. The ceremony hall of the Velthran Royal Palace had been designed to inspire awe, not facilitate warfare. Towering columns of compressed starlight rose to a ceiling that displayed real-time images of the galaxy. Now that ceiling showed only smoke and the bright flashes of plasma fire. The elegant architecture had become a deadly maze, and Jake Morrison navigated it like a predator born to hunt. He moved along the base of a shattered pillar, counting footsteps in his head. The Krill were methodical, trained, but they followed patterns. All soldiers did. Jake had spent 15 years learning to recognize those patterns and exploit them. He waited until the nearest Kryll soldier passed his position, then struck. His hand clamped over the alien's breathing apparatus while his knife found the gap in its armor. The Krill thrashed once, then went still. Jake took the alien's weapon, a pulse carbine with a full charge pack. Better odds now. He glanced toward the Queen. Her remaining guards had formed a tight circle around her, their ornamental weapons looking pathetically inadequate against Krill military hardware. One of the guards was wounded, green blood seeping through his dress uniform. They would not last another 5 minutes. Krill squad rounded the corner in standard tactical formation, overlapping fields of fire covering each other's blind spots. Textbook assault pattern. Jake had fought alongside and against enough alien species to recognize the Krill military doctrine. They were good, well-trained, but they fought by the book. Jake had burned that book years ago. He tossed a piece of rubble to his left. The Krill pivoted toward the sound, exactly as he predicted. Jake was already moving right, firing 3 controlled bursts that dropped the rear guard before the squad could react. The remaining Krill scattered, seeking cover, their formation broken. Jake pressed the advantage, rolling behind a fallen statue and taking out another soldier as it tried to reposition. Queen Zarakhan watched the human move through the battlefield like it was choreographed. Every action had purpose, no wasted movement, no hesitation. Her people valued grace and precision in all things, had built an empire on calculated strategy and overwhelming force, but this was different. This was violence refined to an art form, and the artist was painting with blood. Jake's earpiece crackled. Commander Morrison, Velthran security forces are 3 minutes out. Can you hold? Negative on holding, Jake replied, dropping another Krill with a headshot. We push now or the Queen dies. He did not wait for a response. The security forces were too far away, and the Krill knew it. They were setting up heavy weapons near the main entrance, preparing to cut down everything in the hall and sort out the bodies later. Jake had maybe 90 seconds before those weapons came online. He sprinted toward the Queen's position, firing as he ran. A plasma bolt caught him in the side, burning through his ceremonial jacket and scorching his ribs. He stumbled, recovered, kept moving. Hain was just information, and right now it was telling him he was still alive. Can you run? He shouted at the Queen. Zarakhan stared at him, her husband of less than an hour, bleeding from multiple wounds, asking if she could run. Yes. Then we run. Now. He grabbed her hand, the first physical contact between them since they had spoken their vows. Her skin was cool, smooth, and her grip was surprisingly strong. Her guards moved to follow, but Jake shook his head. You 3 hold this position. Make them think she's still here. Buy us 30 seconds. The guards looked to their queen. She nodded once, and that was all the permission they needed. They were Velthran warriors, and they would die with honor. Jake pulled the Queen through a service entrance he had noted during the pre-ceremony security briefing. Always know your exits. First rule of survival. The corridor beyond was narrow, designed for servants, not grand processions, perfect for their purposes. Behind them, the sound of fighting intensified. The guards were selling their lives dearly. Ahead, Jake could hear the heavy footfalls of Kryle's soldiers sweeping the palace. They were trapped between 2 forces with no backup and limited ammunition. How many more of them? Zarakhan asked. Her voice was steady despite everything. Too many, Jake admitted. But they don't know this palace like you do. Where can we go that they will not expect? The Queen's golden eyes flickered with something that might have been respect. The Royal Vault. 3 levels down. The walls are reinforced against orbital bombardment. If we can reach it, we can seal ourselves inside until help arrives. Lead the way. They moved quickly through the servant passages, the Queen's silver gown trailing behind her like a banner. Jake covered their rear, his captured carbine sweeping for targets. Twice they heard Krill patrols passing nearby, and twice Jake positioned himself between the sound and his wife, ready to fight. Wife. The word felt strange in his mind even now. He had married this woman to save his species, a transaction wrapped in ceremony. But something had shifted when he caught that grenade. When he felt her eyes on him as he fought, this was no longer just duty. He was not sure what it was yet, but it was more than politics. They reached a spiral staircase that descended into darkness. Emergency lighting cast everything in a red glow. The Queen started down, then paused. Why do you fight like this? Jake checked his ammunition. 4 shots left. Like what? Like you have nothing to lose and everything to prove. He met her gaze. Because I do have something to lose now. You asked me to be your husband. That means something to my people. It means I protect you or I die trying. There's no middle ground. Zarakhan had lived for 3 centuries. She had seen empires rise and fall, had negotiated treaties with species humanity had not yet discovered. But she had never met anyone quite like Jake Morrison. Her people had assumed humans were weak, their military primitive compared to Velthran technology. They had agreed to this alliance out of pity more than respect. She would need to reconsider that assessment. An explosion rocked the stairwell above them. The Krill had found their trail.
Jake pushed the Queen ahead. Go.
Fast as you can. They descended 3 levels in less than a minute, emerging into a corridor lined with massive vault doors. Each one was marked with Velthrin script that Jake could not read. The Queen ran to the central vault, her hands moving over a biometric lock. The door was 10 inches of composite armor, designed to withstand anything short of a starship cannon. It began to open with a deep grinding sound. Too slow. Jake could hear the Kryll on the stairs, their clicking language echoing off stone walls. He had maybe 15 seconds. "Get inside," he told the Queen. "Not without you. I will be right behind you." "I promise." It was a lie, and they both knew it. If someone did not hold this corridor, the Kryll would follow them into the vault before the door could seal. Jake had 3 rounds left and at least a dozen hostiles incoming. The math was simple and brutal. But Zara Khan was already pulling him toward the vault, her strength surprising him. "We go together or not at all, husband." Those are the terms. The first Kryll appeared at the stairwell entrance. Jake fired, dropped it, fired again, dropped another. His last round went wide as a Kryll dove for cover. The carbine's charge pack was empty. He tossed it aside and drew his knife. Then the vault door opened fully, and from inside came a sound that made Jake's heart skip, the metallic whine of automated defense systems powering up. He looked at the Queen, saw the smallest smile on her alien features. "Did you think," she asked, "that I would marry someone I could not protect in return?" The corridor erupted in precision laser fire as the vault's security systems engaged. Kryll soldiers fell in neat lines, cut down by weapons that had defended Velthrin royalty for millennia. In 10 seconds it was over. Jake and Zara Khan stood in the entrance to the vault, surrounded by bodies, covered in blood and burn marks, alive against all probability. The Queen's communicator chimed. Her security forces had retaken the palace. The threat was over. She looked at her husband, this human who had fought like a demon to keep her safe, and realized something important. Earth had not sent her a diplomat in soldier's clothing. They had sent her a warrior who understood that some things were worth dying for. The alliance between their peoples would be stronger than anyone had imagined, forged not in ceremony but in combat. Jake Morrison leaned against the vault door, exhausted, wounded, and alive. He had married an alien queen for politics and discovered something unexpected in the process. She was not just a symbol or a treaty. She was someone worth protecting. And she was looking at him like he had just rewritten everything she thought she knew about humanity. The recovery took 3 days. The Velthrin medical technology was advanced beyond anything Earth possessed, but Jake had refused the intensive treatments. Surface wounds only, he insisted. Anything deeper could wait until after the security briefing. Queen Zarkon had overruled him within an hour, and he woke up in a medical pod with most of his injuries healed and a very determined alien physician explaining that royal consorts did not get to make their own medical decisions. The Kryll assault had been coordinated with terrifying precision. 47 commandos had breached palace security using equipment that should not have existed. Velthrin intelligence was still trying to determine who had supplied the Kryll with stealth technology capable of bypassing their most advanced sensors. The attack had killed 38 people, wounded twice that number, and come within minutes of assassinating the Queen. Jake sat in a strategy room deep within the palace, surrounded by Velthrin military commanders who looked at him with a mixture of curiosity and disbelief. The footage from the ceremony hall had been analyzed frame by frame. Human combat doctrine was now a subject of intense interest among the Velthrin general staff. "Your species has been at war for most of your recorded history," General Vextar observed. He was old even by Velthrin standards, his silver skin marked with the scars of a dozen campaigns. "We assumed this made you primitive, chaotic." "We were incorrect." Jake shrugged. "War teaches hard lessons. We learned them all." Indeed. Vextar pulled up a holographic display showing Jake's movements during the battle. You eliminated 17 Kryll soldiers with minimal ammunition and improvised weapons. You adapted to an unfamiliar environment in seconds. You prioritized the Queen's survival over your own without hesitation. This is not chaos, Commander. This is extremely refined combat instinct. "We call it survival," Jake said. "Earth has always been a difficult place to live. We have fought each other, our environment, and anything else that got in our way. When the Kryll started pushing into our space, we were already experts at not dying." Queen Zarkon entered the room, and every Velthrin officer stood immediately. She waved them back to their seats, her attention focused on Jake. "How are your injuries?" "Healed enough to be annoying about being healed against my will," he replied. A slight smile crossed her face. "Good. Then you are well enough to hear what we have learned." The Kryll did not act alone. Someone provided them with intelligence about our security protocols, the ceremony schedule, and the layout of the palace. "We have a traitor somewhere in the royal court." Jake had suspected as much. The attack had been too precise, too well timed.
Any candidates?
Several, but investigating royal court members is delicate work. If we move too openly, the traitor will disappear, or trigger whatever backup plan they have prepared. Zara Khan turned to the assembled officers. Commander Morrison has demonstrated exceptional skill in combat situations. I propose we use that skill in a different capacity. Vaxstar leaned forward. You want him to hunt the traitor? I want him to help me hunt the traitor, the Queen corrected. As my consort, he has access to court functions and private gatherings. People will underestimate him because he is human, because he is new to our culture. That gives us an advantage. Jake understood immediately. She wanted to use him as bait and investigator simultaneously. Risky, but probably their best option. I assume there will be another formal event soon? The Unity Gala. 5 days from now. Every major noble house will attend, along with diplomatic representatives from a dozen allied species. If our traitor is among the nobility, they will be there. And if they try to finish what the Krill started, Zara Khan's golden eyes met his. Then I trust you will demonstrate once again why underestimating humanity is a fatal mistake. The next 5 days were intense. Jake divided his time between learning Velthran court protocols and training with their elite guard units. The guards were skeptical at first, convinced that Jake's success in the ceremony hall had been luck or desperation. That skepticism lasted until the first sparring session, when Jake put their best hand-to-hand specialist on the mat 3 times in 2 minutes. Word spread quickly. The human consort was not just a diplomatic appointment. He was dangerous. Jake also spent time with the Queen, actual time beyond formal requirements. They discussed strategy, compared their species' military histories, and began to understand each other as individuals rather than political symbols. Zara Khan was brilliant, calculating every scenario with the precision of a master strategist. But she was also curious about Earth, about human culture, about the strange species that had survived and thrived on a world that seemed designed to kill them. Your planet has no unified government, she observed one evening as they reviewed intelligence reports. Multiple nations, constant conflicts, resource competition. By all logic, you should have destroyed yourselves centuries ago. Jake poured himself a drink from a bottle of Earth whiskey he had brought with him. We came close a few times. Nuclear weapons, biological warfare, climate collapse. But we are stubborn. Every time we pushed ourselves to the brink, we pulled back just enough to survive. Made us tough, made us adaptable. And now you are here, married to an alien queen, hunting traitors in a palace on a world you had never seen until a month ago. Life gets weird sometimes. Zarkon accepted the glass of whiskey he offered, studied it carefully, then took a small sip. Her face contorted slightly at the taste. This is deliberately unpleasant. It grows on you. I doubt that sincerely. But she took another sip anyway. Jake found himself smiling. Somewhere in the past few days, this arranged marriage had become something more complex. He respected her mind, her determination, the way she carried the weight of an empire without letting it crush her. And he suspected she felt something similar toward him, though neither of them had spoken about it directly. The Unity Gala arrived with all the spectacle expected of a Velthran royal event. Thousands of guests filled the grand ballroom, representing the most powerful families and factions in the Empire. Jake wore formal human military dress, a compromise between Earth customs and Velthran expectations. He looked uncomfortable and out of place, exactly as planned. The Queen's intelligence network had identified 3 primary suspects. Lord Kithrin, a military contractor who had lost several lucrative contracts when the Human Alliance was announced. Lady Savannah, a court advisor who had opposed the marriage from the beginning. And Ambassador Thexiel, representing a neutral species that had maintained trade relationships with the Krill for decades. Jake moved through the crowd, playing the role of a confused human trying to navigate alien social customs. He stumbled over Velthran pronunciation, asked obvious questions, and generally made himself seem harmless and slightly foolish. People relaxed around him, spoke more freely than they would have if they saw him as a threat. Lady Savannah was the first to approach him. She was elegant, even by Velthran standards, her silver skin adorned with bioluminescent patterns that shifted and flowed with her movements. Commander Morrison, I trust you are recovering well from the unfortunate incident at your wedding. Getting there? Jake replied, affecting a casual tone. Still learning the layout of this place. Easy to get lost. Indeed. The palace has many hidden passages and forgotten rooms. One could disappear quite easily if they knew where to look. Her golden eyes studied him carefully. Tell me, Do you find our customs restrictive? The formality, the protocols, so different from human culture. It is an adjustment, Jake admitted, but I am adapting. Adaptation is survival, Savannah said. Those who cannot adapt are removed. A lesson your species understands well, I think. The conversation continued, polite and seemingly meaningless, but Jake noted the subtle probing, the way Savannah tested his reactions. She was looking for something, trying to determine if he was a real threat or just a convenient puppet. Across the room, Lord Kethrin was speaking with a group of military officers. Jake drifted closer, catching fragments of conversation about weapons contracts and supply chain disruptions. Kethron was angry, barely concealing his frustration behind formal courtesies. The human alliance had cost him billions, and he was not the type to accept losses quietly. Ambassador Thexile was more difficult to read. His species, the Zorvath, were insectoid and communicated partially through pheromones that humans could not detect. Jake would need different tactics for him. The evening progressed with carefully orchestrated chaos. Jake accidentally wandered into restricted areas, forcing security to escort him back. He spilled a drink near Kethrin's table, creating an opportunity for a brief apology and conversation. He asked Thexil poorly constructed questions about Zorvath culture, appearing ignorant while actually gathering information. By midnight, he had narrowed the suspects. Savannah was too obvious, her opposition too public. Kethrin was angry but not treasonous. That left Texel, who had been too helpful, too eager to befriend the confused human, and who had asked very specific questions about Velthorn security protocols while pretending to make small talk. Jake found the Queen in a private antechamber, surrounded by advisors. He caught her eye, gave a subtle nod toward the garden terrace. She excused herself gracefully and joined him a few minutes later. "Thexil," Jake said quietly. "He is our traitor." "Explain." Jake laid out his observations, the pattern of questions, the timing of certain comments. Zarkhan listened carefully, her analytical mind processing the information. "It fits. The Zorvath have maintained neutrality for centuries, but they have also profited from selling information to the highest bidder. If the Kryl offered enough, Thexil would provide access. So we confront him? Not yet. We need proof, and we need to know if he is working alone or if there are others." The Queen paused, considering options. "Can you follow him without being detected?" Jake smiled. "I have spent half my career sneaking into places I was not supposed to be. One more time will not hurt." The gala continued for another hour before Thexil made his move. He slipped away from the main ballroom, heading toward the eastern wing of the palace. Jake followed at a careful distance, using the shadows and architectural features to remain unseen. The ambassador moved with purpose, checking behind him occasionally but not detecting his human shadow. Thexil entered a communications suite, one of dozens scattered throughout the palace for diplomatic use. Jake positioned himself near a ventilation grate, close enough to observe through a partially reflective surface. The ambassador activated a secure channel, and Jake recognized the encryption signature, Krill Military Band. The conversation was brief and in a language Jake did not speak, but the intent was clear. Thexil was providing an update, and from his agitated movements, the update was not positive. The failed assassination had disrupted plans. The human consort had become an unexpected variable. New strategies were needed. Jake recorded everything with a micro-camera built into his formal jacket. When Texel finished and prepared to leave, Jake was already gone, melting back into the gala crowds as if he had never left. He delivered the recording to the Queen an hour later. She watched it twice, her expression growing colder with each viewing. "This is treason of the highest order. Thexil will be arrested and his government will answer for this violation of diplomatic immunity. Will that start a war? Possibly, but allowing treachery to go unpunished will guarantee one." Zara Khan stood, her regal bearing returning in full force. "Alert the guard. We move now while he is still on palace grounds." The arrest was swift and professional. Thexil was taken into custody without incident, his diplomatic credentials revoked immediately. The Zorvath government received a formal accusation within the hour, along with all evidence of their ambassador's crimes. They would have 48 hours to respond before the Velthorn Empire considered them hostile actors. But as Jake and Zarakhan stood in the Situation Room, watching diplomatic protocols unfold, both of them knew this was not over. The Krill were still out there. The threat to the Alliance remained. And somewhere in the galaxy, forces were moving to destroy the bridge between humanity and the Velthorn before it could become unbreakable. The war was coming. The question was whether the Alliance would survive long enough to matter. The Zorvath government's response arrived in 36 hours, faster than expected and far more aggressive than diplomatic norms allowed. They denied all knowledge of Thexel's actions, claimed the evidence was fabricated, and withdrew their ambassador to the Velthran court. Within 12 hours of that withdrawal, 3 Zorvath trade convoys changed course toward Kryl-controlled space. The implications were clear. Jake stood on the observation deck of the Royal Palace, watching Velthran warships maneuver into defensive formations above the planet. The fleet was impressive, thousands of vessels ranging from small patrol craft to massive dreadnoughts that could crack continents. But even this overwhelming display of force could not guarantee victory if the Zorvath threw their support behind the Kryl. "You are troubled," Zarakhan said, joining him at the viewport. She had changed from formal robes into something more practical, armor disguised as elegant clothing, a queen preparing for war while maintaining appearances. "Just thinking about what comes next," Jake replied. "Earth sent me here to secure an alliance. Instead, I seem to have accelerated a galactic conflict. The conflict was inevitable. The Kryl have been expanding aggressively for years, and the Zorvath have been profiting from every border skirmish and territorial dispute. Our alliance simply forced them to reveal their intentions earlier than planned." She stood beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "You did not cause this war, Jake Morrison. You merely exposed the one that was already forming. Doesn't make me feel better about it." "It should. Wars fought on your own terms are easier to win than wars fought on the enemy's schedule." Before Jake could respond, alarms blared throughout the palace. Emergency protocols activated automatically, sealing blast doors and routing all communications to the command center. General Vextar's voice came through on every channel simultaneously. Multiple hostile contacts emerging from hyperspace. Kryl fleet composition, approximately 800 vessels. They are broadcasting a demand for the Queen's surrender and the dissolution of the human alliance. We have 90 seconds before they enter firing range. Jake and Zarakhan ran toward the command center, their personal guards falling into formation around them. The Situation Room was controlled chaos when they arrived, officers coordinating defensive positions while analysts tried to determine how an entire Kryl battle fleet had reached the homeworld undetected. "They came through the Zorvath trade corridor," Vextar explained, highlighting routes on the tactical display. "Our sensors were configured to ignore civilian traffic from neutral species. The Kryl used Zorvath transponder codes to bypass our early warning systems." "How long until our reserve fleets can reinforce?" the Queen asked. 4 hours minimum. We have 600 ships in system now. Against 800 Kryl warships, the odds are not favorable." Jake studied the tactical display, his mind shifting into combat mode. He had commanded human naval forces during the early Kryl incursions, understood their battle doctrine and strategic preferences. They are overextended. 800 ships is a massive commitment, probably half their available fleet strength. They are betting everything on a quick victory, which means they have a plan to achieve that victory, Zarakhan observed. "They would not risk this much on a conventional battle they might lose." She was right. The Kryl were aggressive but not suicidal. Jake examined the fleet deployment pattern, looking for anomalies. There. 20 ships in the center of their formation were broadcasting different energy signatures than standard Kryl warships. "What are those vessels?" he asked, pointing at the tactical markers. An analyst pulled up detailed scans. "Unknown class, heavy shielding, massive power generation, but minimal visible weapons." "They are being guarded by the rest of the fleet like they are, oh no, planetary bombardment platforms," Vextar said grimly. "They are going to glass the surface from orbit. Kill the Queen, destroy the capital, break the Empire's will to fight. All in one strike." The command center went silent. Planetary bombardment was considered an extreme measure, banned by most galactic civilizations. The collateral damage would be catastrophic, billions of lives ended in minutes. But the Kryl had never signed those treaties. They fought wars to win, and if that meant turning planets into radioactive wastelands, they did it without hesitation. "Evacuation is not possible," Zarakhan said. "Even if we could get the orbital lifts running at full capacity, we could only save a fraction of the population. We fight here, or we die here." "Then we fight," Jake said, "but not the way they expect." He turned to Vextar. "Those bombardment platforms need time to charge, correct? They cannot fire immediately upon arrival? Estimated 30 minutes for full charge cycle? And they need to maintain stable orbit to target accurately?" "Yes, but they are protected by the entire Kryl fleet. We cannot get close enough to destroy them before they fire." Jake smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. Who said anything about destroying them? We just need to move them? He began outlining a plan that sounded insane even to his own ears, but insane plans had worked before, and they were running out of options. The Velthrine officers listened with growing horror and grudging respect as this human commander proposed using their most advanced warships as massive kinetic projectiles. You want to ram our dreadnoughts into their bombardment platforms, Vexstar summarized, using automated navigation and skeleton crews to minimize casualties, while the rest of our fleet provides covering fire and draws their attention. Not just ram, hyperspace ram. Jump in at point-blank range with enough velocity to punch through their shields before they can react. We only need to hit 5 or 6 of the platforms to disrupt their firing solution. The rest of the Krill fleet will break formation to protect the remaining platforms, and that gives us the opening we need. It also costs us our most powerful ships. Ships can be rebuilt. Planets cannot. Zarakhan studied the tactical display, running calculations in her head. The plan was desperate, wasteful, and completely contrary to Velthrin military doctrine. It was also probably their only chance. Do it. Evacuate all non-essential personnel from Dreadnoughts, Valor, Retribution, and Starbreaker. Set collision courses and prepare for automated hyperspace insertion. The orders went out immediately. Jake watched skeleton crews rushing to their stations, volunteers accepting what might be a one-way mission. The Velthrin were not used to this kind of warfare, not accustomed to throwing away valuable assets for tactical advantage, but they were learning fast. I should be on one of those ships, Jake said. I planned this operation. I should see it through. Absolutely not, the Queen replied. You are too valuable, and your death would shatter the human alliance before it truly begins. You stay here. Then so do you. If I am too valuable to risk, so are you. They locked eyes, neither willing to back down. Finally, Vexstar cleared his throat. Perhaps both of you could contribute more to the war effort by coordinating the overall battle rather than dying heroically on a collision course dreadnought. Just a suggestion, Jake conceded the point. Fine, but if this goes wrong, I reserve the right to say I told you so. If this goes wrong, we will all be dead, Zarakhan pointed out. Your smugness will be brief at best. The dreadnoughts launched on schedule, their massive hulls accelerating to ramming speed while the rest of the Velthrin fleet engaged the Krill vanguard. Plasma and particle beams lit up the orbital space, ships exploding in brilliant flashes as the battle intensified. The Krill were disciplined, maintaining formation even under heavy fire, but they had not anticipated the Velthrin willingness to sacrifice major assets. Dreadnought Valor was the first to reach its target. This ship emerged from hyperspace directly adjacent to a bombardment platform, traveling at a significant fraction of light speed. The platform's shields collapsed under the impact, and both vessels erupted in a fireball visible from the surface. 2 more dreadnoughts followed within seconds, eliminating additional platforms and throwing the Krill formation into chaos. The remaining bombardment platforms began emergency evasive maneuvers, but they were designed for stable firing positions, not combat maneuvering. Velthrin fighters swarmed the confused Krill fleet, exploiting gaps in their defensive screen. For 10 minutes, the battle hung in perfect balance. Then the Velthrin reserve fleet arrived early, having burned their engines beyond safe limits to reach the battlefield. The Krill commander recognized a losing scenario when he saw one. The bombardment operation had failed, and continuing to fight would result in the destruction of his entire fleet. He gave the order to retreat, and 800 Krill warships began jumping to hyperspace in a coordinated withdrawal. But they had accomplished something important, even in defeat. They had proven the Velthrin were not invincible. They had forced the Empire to sacrifice valuable ships and reveal tactical weaknesses, and they had demonstrated that this war would not be won easily by either side. In the command center, Jake and Zarakhan watched the enemy retreat. They had won, but the cost was evident. 3 dreadnoughts destroyed, dozens of smaller vessels lost, and thousands of casualties. The war had truly begun, and this was just the opening move. They will come back, Jake said. Stronger next time. They learned from this battle just like we did. Then we will be ready, the Queen replied. Together. She took his hand, a gesture that surprised them both, but it felt right, natural. They were partners now, in politics and warfare. The marriage that had begun as a strategic necessity had become something genuine in the crucible of combat. Jake Morrison looked at his alien wife, this queen who commanded fleets and ruled an empire, and realized he would fight 1,000 battles to keep her safe, not because of treaties or alliances, but because somewhere in the chaos and violence he had started to care about her as a person, not just a symbol. And from the way she looked back at him, he suspected she felt the same way. The war for the galaxy had begun. But in the midst of that war, something unexpected had taken root. Understanding. And maybe, against all probability, something that looked like love. The war intensified over the following months. Krill forces, now openly supported by Zorvath intelligence and resources, launched coordinated strikes across 7 sectors. The Velthran Empire responded with overwhelming force, but the enemy had learned from their initial defeat. They avoided direct fleet engagements, instead targeting supply lines and isolated colonies. It was death by 1,000 cuts, and it was working. Jake found himself splitting time between the palace and the front lines. The Queen needed him for strategic planning and as a symbol of the human alliance, but he was also the most experienced combat commander when it came to fighting the Krill. So he traveled, spending weeks on forward operating bases before returning to the capital for briefings and diplomatic functions. Earth had committed its entire fleet to the war effort. It was a fraction of the Velthran Navy's size, but human ships were built for different purposes, fast, maneuverable, and designed for asymmetric warfare. They excelled at the kind of hit-and-run tactics the Krill were employing, and their presence forced the enemy to adapt once again. Captain Lisa Chen commanded the human contingent. She was Jake's former second-in-command, a tactical genius who had earned her reputation fighting pirates and corporate militias in the outer colonies. When she arrived at the Velthran homeworld for strategic coordination, she took one look at Jake and started laughing. "You actually married an alien queen," she said, shaking her head in disbelief. "I thought that was propaganda, morale building for the troops." "It is complicated," Jake replied. "Complicated like you signed a contract, or complicated like you actually have feelings for her?" He did not answer immediately, and that told Lisa everything she needed to know. Well, damn. Jake Morrison, the man who once told me emotional attachments were tactical liabilities, caught feelings for royalty. The universe has a sense of humor, after all. Zara Khan entered the briefing room before Jake could formulate a response. She assessed Lisa in a single glance, processed the dynamics of their relationship, and extended a formal greeting. "Captain Chen, your reputation precedes you. I understand you have conducted 17 successful operations against Krill positions in the past 2 months. 18 as of yesterday," Lisa corrected. "We took out a logistics hub in the Kethra sector. They will be short on ammunition for at least a week. Impressive. Please join us. We are planning a major offensive, and human tactical input would be valuable." The briefing lasted 4 hours. The plan was ambitious, requiring coordination between Velthran, human, and allied forces across multiple systems. The objective was a Kryl command station that coordinated their entire sector operations. Destroying it would disrupt enemy communications and force them to reorganize, buying the Alliance time to reinforce vulnerable positions. "The station is heavily defended," General Vexstar explained, highlighting defenses on the tactical display. 300 warships, orbital defense platforms, and a planetary shield generator that covers the entire installation. A direct assault would be suicide. "Then we do not assault directly," Jake said. "We make them think we are attacking elsewhere, pull their forces out of position, then hit the real target with everything we have." Lisa nodded. "Classic feint and strike." "But the Krill are not stupid. They will see through an obvious diversion." "Which is why it cannot be obvious. We need to commit real forces to the feint, make it dangerous enough that they have to respond." Jake pulled up a secondary target. "The Zorvath supply depot at Jaras. It is only 2 jumps from the command station, strategically important and lightly defended. We hit it hard with human and Velthran forces. The Krau will assume it is our primary objective and redeploy to defend their Zorvath allies." "Leaving the command station vulnerable," Zarakhan finished. "We send a strike force through the gap, destroy the station, and withdraw before they can respond. Risky, but viable." "Who leads the strike force?" Vexstar asked. Jake and the Queen answered simultaneously. "I do." They looked at each other, the familiar argument about risk and command responsibility playing out in the silence. Finally, Zarakhan spoke. "We lead it together. The Velthran fleet needs to see their queen in combat, and the Alliance needs both human and Velthran commanders working as one." Lisa glanced between them, a knowing smile on her face. Definitely complicated. The operation launched 3 weeks later. Lisa took command of the feint, leading a combined human Velthran task force toward Jaras, with orders to make as much noise as possible. She executed the mission perfectly, broadcasting her approach, engaging Krill patrols, and generally behaving like a commander who wanted the enemy to know exactly where she was. The Krill took the bait. 2/3 of their forces at the command station redeployed to defend Duras, convinced they were facing the main Allied offensive. That left approximately 100 warships guarding the station, still formidable but manageable. Jake and Zarakhan led the strike force personally, commanding from the bridge of the royal flagship Eternal Dawn. 50 ships carefully selected for speed and firepower. They jumped into the system at maximum velocity, weapons already charging. "All ships engage at will," the Queen ordered. "Primary target is the command station. Ignore everything else unless it directly threatens our attack run." The Velthrin crews responded with disciplined precision, their ships moving in perfect coordination. Human vessels added controlled chaos to the formation, breaking patterns and creating unpredictable attack vectors. The Krall defenders scrambled to respond, but they were outnumbered and facing commanders who had spent months learning their tactical weaknesses. Jake coordinated the fighter squadrons, sending them ahead to suppress point defense systems. Zarakhan directed the capital ships, punching holes in the enemy formation with devastating precision strikes. They worked together seamlessly, anticipating each other's moves, covering weaknesses, exploiting opportunities. The battle reached command station's outer defenses 15 minutes after initial contact. The planetary shield was impressive, a shimmering barrier of energy that could withstand sustained bombardment from an entire fleet. But shields had weaknesses. They required massive power generation, and that power had to come from somewhere. "Target the generator stations," Jake ordered. "Hit them simultaneously from multiple angles. Overload the distribution network." 20 ships opened fire at once, focusing their weapons on 3 generator facilities. The shield held for 10 seconds, then collapsed in a cascading failure that lit up every sensor in the system. Without the shield, the command station was vulnerable. Boarding parties launched immediately. Velthrin Special Forces and Human Marines hit the station from 6 different points, fighting through automated defenses and Krill security forces. Jake went with them, leading a team toward the central command hub. Zarakhan remained on the Eternal Dawn, coordinating the overall assault and preparing for the inevitable counterattack. The station's interior was a maze of corridors designed for Krill physiology, narrow and claustrophobic by human standards. Jake's team moved quickly, their training in close-quarters combat proving decisive. They encountered heavy resistance near the command hub, Krill elite guards who fought with fanatical determination. "Flashbangs, then breach," Jake ordered. 3, 2, 1, execute. The grenades detonated, temporarily blinding the defenders. Jake's team stormed through, weapons firing. The firefight was brutal and brief, ending with the command hub secured and Krill officers dead or captured. Jake immediately accessed their systems, downloading everything before the enemy could initiate self-destruct protocols. "Data package secured," he reported to the Queen. "Initiating demolition charges. We have 2 minutes to clear the station." The withdrawal was textbook. Teams fell back in coordinated stages, covering each other's retreat while demolition charges ticked toward detonation. Jake's team was the last to board their shuttle, lifting off just as the first charges exploded. The command station came apart in sections, critical systems failing in sequence. By the time the Krill reinforcements arrived from Jarrus, the installation was a spreading debris field, and the Allied strike force was already jumping to hyperspace. The victory was significant. Captured data revealed Krill fleet movements, supply networks, and strategic priorities. Allied intelligence would spend months analyzing it all. But more importantly, the operation proved that the Alliance could execute complex operations requiring perfect coordination between species with vastly different military traditions. On the bridge of Eternal Dawn, Jake and Zarakhan watched the battle damage reports come in. They had lost 8 ships and nearly 300 personnel. Expensive, but nowhere near as costly as it could have been. "You fight well," the Queen said. "Not just as an individual warrior, but as a commander. Your people are fortunate to have you." "I learned from watching you," Jake replied. "You coordinate a fleet the way I coordinate a fire team. Different scale, same principles." She smiled, a rare expression that transformed her entire face. "We make a good team." "We do." They stood together, watching stars slide past as the ship traveled through hyperspace. Months ago, they had been strangers from different species, brought together by political necessity. Now they were partners, their strengths complementing each other, their weaknesses covered by the other's abilities. Jake Morrison had come to secure an alliance. He had found something far more valuable. A partner. A friend. And maybe, if he was honest with himself, something even deeper. The war was far from over. The Krill and Zorvath would regroup, adapt, come back stronger. But for the first time since the conflict began, Jake felt genuinely hopeful. Not because victory was certain, but because he was not fighting alone anymore. He had an alien queen who commanded fleets with the precision of a master strategist, and she had a human warrior who understood that sometimes winning meant being willing to sacrifice everything for the people you cared about. Together, they would end this war. And maybe when the fighting finally stopped, they would discover what came after duty and necessity faded away. The captured data from the Kryl command station changed everything. Intelligence analysts worked around the clock, decrypting files and tracing communication networks. What they found was worse than anyone had anticipated. The Krill-Zorvoth alliance was just the surface layer. Behind them stood something far more dangerous: the hegemony, a coalition of 12 species who had been manipulating galactic politics for centuries. The Krill expansion was not random aggression, but a carefully orchestrated campaign designed to weaken established powers and create power vacuums the hegemony could exploit. The Velthran Empire had been their primary target, and the Human Alliance had disrupted decades of planning. "They will not stop until we are destroyed," General Vexstar said, studying the intelligence reports with growing concern. "The hegemony does not forgive disruptions to their long-term strategies. They will commit whatever resources necessary to eliminate both the Velthran and humanity." Jake examined the tactical projections. How many ships can they field? Conservative estimates place their combined fleet strength at 15,000 warships. We have 6,000. Earth can contribute maybe 500 more. Even with all our allies, we are outnumbered 3-1. The command center fell silent. Those odds were not just unfavorable, they were catastrophic. The hegemony could simply overwhelm them through sheer numbers, accepting heavy casualties because they had ships to spare. Zar Khan refused to accept defeat. Numbers matter, but they are not absolute. We have advantages they do not. Our alliance is based on genuine cooperation, not coercion and manipulation. Our forces fight for something they believe in, not because they fear their masters. That counts for something. It counts for morale, Vexstar agreed, but morale does not stop missiles or deflect particle beams. No, Jake said slowly, an idea forming. But it changes how you use what you have. The hegemony expects us to fight conventionally, fleet against fleet, trying to match their numbers. What if we do not? What if we make this so expensive that even with superior numbers, continuing the war becomes untenable? He pulled up star maps, highlighting key systems. The hegemony controls territory across multiple sectors. That is a lot of space to defend. We cannot match their fleet strength, but we can hit their infrastructure. Supply depots, shipyards, communication relays. Make them worry about logistics instead of conquest. Force them to defend everything, which means they can defend nothing effectively. Lisa Chen, monitoring the discussion remotely from her ship, added her perspective. Jake is right. We have been fighting defensively, reacting to their moves. Time to make them react to ours. Human doctrine calls it strategic raiding. Hit them where they are weak. Avoid direct engagements. Make every system a potential target. Zara Khan considered the proposal. It went against Velthran military tradition, which emphasized decisive battles and territorial control. But tradition had limits when facing annihilation. We would need coordination across dozens of systems simultaneously. Small task forces operating independently, striking targets of opportunity. High risk, high reward. And it plays to our strengths, Jake added. Human forces excel at independent operations. Velthran forces have the firepower to make each raid devastating. Combined, we'd become unpredictable, dangerous, and very difficult to counter. The strategy was approved over the next 3 days, with extensive planning to ensure task forces could operate without constant central command. Jake and Zara Khan divided responsibilities. She would coordinate the overall campaign from the capital, managing resources and diplomatic efforts. He would lead the most critical raids personally, demonstrating that both human and Velthran leadership were willing to share the risks. The first wave of raids launched simultaneously across 8 systems. Human corvettes and Velthran cruisers hit supply depots, destroying stockpiles and disrupting logistics networks. The hegemony responded by reinforcing strategic locations exactly as predicted. But reinforcing everywhere meant weakening concentrations, creating new vulnerabilities. Jake led a strike against a hegemony shipyard in the Kalos system. The facility was massive, capable of producing 20 warships per month. Destroying it would hurt their long-term capabilities significantly. But it was also heavily defended, with static defenses and a rapid response fleet. His task force consisted of 12 ships, mixed human and Velthran crews working together with increasing efficiency. They jumped into the system at an oblique angle using the local star's radiation to mask their approach. By the time hegemony sensors detected them, they were already in attack range. All ships weapons free. Target the construction bays first, then the material processors. We have 15 minutes before their reinforcements arrive. The attack was surgical. Precision strikes collapsed construction frameworks and ignited volatile materials. Secondary explosions rippled through the facility as safety systems failed. The defending fleet scrambled to respond, but Jake's ships were already withdrawing, jumping to hyperspace before the enemy could bring their full firepower to bear. Total time in system, 11 minutes. Damage inflicted, catastrophic. Casualties taken, minimal. It was a template they would repeat hundreds of times over the next months. Hit hard, hit fast, disappear before the enemy could respond. The hegemony tried to adapt, repositioning fleets to cover likely targets, but they had too much territory and too few commanders who understood asymmetric warfare. Zara Khan managed the diplomatic front with equal skill. Every raid was carefully documented, evidence presented to neutral species showing the hegemony's manipulation and aggression. Public opinion shifted slowly but steadily. Species that had remained neutral began questioning their relationships with hegemony members. Some quietly offered intelligence to the alliance. A few even committed military support. The tide was turning, but it was a slow and costly process. Every raid risked ships and lives. Every diplomatic victory created new enemies. Jake found himself constantly traveling between combat zones in the capital, balancing his roles as military commander and royal consort. During one rare period of rest, Zara Khan found him in the palace gardens, staring at Earth through a telescope. She had learned to recognize when he needed these moments of quiet reflection. "Do you miss it?" she asked. "Your homeworld?" "Every day," Jake admitted. "But I made a choice when I came here. I knew what I was giving up. And now, do you regret that choice?" He turned to face her, this alien queen who had become so much more than a political arrangement. "No. I found something here I did not expect to find. Purpose beyond survival. Partnership beyond duty." He paused, searching for the right words. "I found you." Zara Khan stepped closer. They had been dancing around this conversation for months, both aware of the growing connection between them, but neither willing to address it directly. "Our marriage was a strategy, a tool to bind our species together." "It was," Jake agreed. "But tools can become more than their original purpose. A weapon can become a symbol. A treaty can become genuine friendship." He met her golden eyes. "A political arrangement can become something real." She touched his face, her silver skin cool against his. "I have lived for 3 centuries, ruled an empire, commanded fleets, shaped the destiny of billions. But I have never felt—" She paused, struggling with emotions that did not come naturally to her species. "I have never felt what I feel when I am with you." "What do you feel?" Jake asked softly. "Like I am not alone anymore. Like I have a partner who sees me not as a queen or a symbol, but as a person. Like I can trust someone completely for the first time in my very long life." Jake kissed her then, and she responded without hesitation. It was not the first time they had kissed. Formal ceremonies required certain displays, but those had been performances. This was genuine, raw, and honest. When they finally separated, both of them were smiling. "This complicates things," Zara Khan observed. "Everything about this situation is already complicated," Jake replied. "This just adds another layer. A better layer. Definitely a better layer." They stood together in the garden, watching stars wheel overhead while, across the galaxy, their forces continued fighting for the future of both their species. The war was far from over, but they had found something worth fighting for beyond duty or survival. They had found each other. The final confrontation came in the Terminus system, a strategically worthless location that became important precisely because it was worthless. The hegemony had consolidated their remaining forces there, 15,000 warships in a formation designed to force a decisive battle.
They were tired of raids and disruptions. They wanted to end this war with overwhelming force.
The Alliance could field 8,000 ships, every available vessel from a dozen species. It was still a losing equation, but sometimes you had to fight even when the odds were against you. Jake and Zara Khan stood on the bridge of Eternal Dawn watching the enemy fleet assemble. Around them, Allied forces prepared for what might be their last battle. The mood was grim but determined. They had come too far to surrender now. "They expect us to meet them head-on," Zara Khan observed. "Fleet against fleet, trading casualties until one side breaks. Then we disappoint them," Jake said. "We have been learning their patterns for months. Time to use that knowledge." He outlined his plan to the assembled commanders. It was insane, required perfect timing, and would probably get them all killed. Everyone agreed it was their best chance. The battle began with the Alliance fleet advancing in standard formation, seemingly accepting the hegemony's terms for engagement. The enemy moved to meet them, confident in their numerical superiority. Then the Alliance forces scattered, breaking into hundreds of small task groups that moved in apparently random directions. The hegemony formation tried to adapt, but coordinating 15,000 ships was inherently more difficult than coordinating 8,000. Gaps appeared in their lines. Small at first, then growing as confusion spread, the Alliance task groups exploited these gaps ruthlessly, concentrating fire on isolated enemy vessels before withdrawing. It was chaos, the complete opposite of traditional fleet tactics. Ships darted in and out of firing range, targeting weapon systems and engines rather than trying for kills. The goal was not to destroy the hegemony fleet, but to cripple it, reduce its effectiveness without requiring overwhelming firepower. Jake led one of the most aggressive task groups, his ships diving deep into enemy formations and emerging on the other side. Zarkhan coordinated the overall chaos, tracking hundreds of separate engagements and redirecting forces where needed. Together, they transformed a disadvantage in numbers into an advantage in tactical flexibility. The battle raged for 6 hours. Ships burned, crews died, but the Alliance held together. And slowly and possibly, the hegemony fleet began to fracture. Not all at once, but in pieces. A squadron retreating here, a damaged ship withdrawing there, small cracks that grew into structural failures. When the hegemony finally broke, it broke completely. Their commanders could no longer maintain cohesion across such a massive force, fighting in such chaotic conditions. Ships retreated independently, abandoning coordination for individual survival. The Alliance pressed the advantage, harrying the retreat but not overextending. When it was over, the Terminus system belonged to the Alliance. The hegemony had lost nearly half their fleet, and the survivors were scattered across a dozen systems. It would take them years to rebuild if they ever did. On the Bridge of Eternal Dawn, Jake and Zarkhan watched the enemy retreat. They had won, but the cost was terrible. 3,000 Allied ships destroyed, hundreds of thousands dead. But they had survived, and the galaxy would remember that the Alliance could not be broken by numbers alone. "It is over," Zarkhan said quietly. "For now," Jake agreed. "They will come back eventually, but we will be ready." The Queen took his hand, and together they sent the message that would echo across every Allied world. Victory. Survival. And proof that sometimes, against all odds, determination and cooperation could defeat overwhelming force. In the months that followed, the Alliance formalized into something more permanent. The Velthran, Empire, and Earth became the core of a new coalition, other species joining as the hegemony's influence waned. There would be more conflicts, more challenges, but the foundation had been laid for something that could last. Jake Morrison looked at his wife, this alien queen who had married a human stranger for political necessity and found genuine partnership instead. They had fought together, bled together, and built something meaningful from the chaos of war. "What happens now?" he asked. Zarkhan smiled. "Now we figure out how to rule an empire while being married to someone from another species. I suspect that will be more challenging than the war." "Probably," Jake agreed, "but I think we can handle it. Together, always together." And as the stars wheeled overhead and their fleets began the long journey home, two people from different worlds stood side by side, ready to face whatever came next. The war had ended, but their story was just beginning.